Okay, so let's talk about a band that for a solid 2 decades basically existed in a parallel universe. You know the type. They're building this massive army of fans, selling millions of records, filling up arenas, and somehow they're flying almost completely under the mainstream radar. This is the incredible story of O.A.R. and their, well, grassroots revolution.
And this quote right here from frontman Mark Roberge, it's basically the key to understanding everything about them. Seriously. From day one, they just decided, you know what, we're going to play by our own rules. They set out to build their own community and define success entirely on their own terms. And that philosophy, it shaped their entire career.
So that's really the big question, isn't it? How did a band that basically told the industry no thanks end up selling out a place like Madison Square Garden? I mean, in a business that is absolutely obsessed with radio hits and major label backing, how does a group of friends from a Maryland suburb build a career that's so solid, with a fan base so loyal, that they can headline one of the most famous arenas on the planet? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go way back, long before they ever stepped on a stage that big.
All right, so let's start with a Rockville brotherhood. To really get this band, you have to understand that in the beginning, it wasn't even about the music. It was about friendship. This wasn't some group manufactured by a label. This was a real-deal brotherhood, forged in the suburbs of Rockville, Maryland. You know, where life was all about just hanging out on driveways and in parking lots.
And their origin story, it honestly plays out like something from a movie. It all kicks off in 8th grade. The guys see a Pearl Jam special on TV and get totally inspired. That spark leads them to their first talent show. And get this, the band still talks about that show as having one of the loudest crowds they've ever played for. By 1996, they make it official and form the band at their high school. Just a year later, they're recording their debut album, The Wanderer. And where do they record it? Not in some fancy studio, but in their drummer's parents' basement. That whole do-it-yourself spirit was just baked into their DNA from the absolute get-go.
And you can hear that reality all over their early music. A song like I Feel Home, that wasn't about some abstract idea. It was literally, as Mark Roberge says, about those nights just hanging out on driveways and in parking lots, building the bonds that would become the foundation of the band for, what, the next 25-plus years? That's the kind of raw authenticity that fans latched onto right away.
So now we're at the Ohio State playbook, building an army, one campus at a time. See, friendship was the foundation, for sure. But moving to college, that's where the genius of their strategy really starts to shine. Instead of trying to get a record deal or conquer some big city music scene, they had a different idea. They were going to conquer a campus.
60,000. Think about that for a second. That's how many students were at Ohio State University when they decided to go there. And yeah, they didn't just pick any campus. They went to what was then the biggest school in the entire country. The story goes that Richard Ahn got a call from his bandmates basically saying, dude, you have to come here. There are 60,000 kids. This is the place to grow this thing. They didn't see a college. They saw a captive audience of 60,000 potential fans.
So what they built there was basically a viral marketing machine before social media even existed. It was brilliant. When actual venues wouldn't book them, no problem. They just played these huge college house parties. They handed out tapes, and their friends would take those tapes to other colleges all over the country. And then came the ultimate game changer, Napster. Right when the music industry was freaking out, calling it a threat, O.A.R. leaned in. They became one of the first bands to just explode on the platform. Their music spread like wildfire, completely sidestepping all the traditional gatekeepers.
Next up, the live show revolution. Because they were way more than just a jam band. All of this grassroots buzz, all this word of mouth, it all pointed to one single truth. You just had to see them live. The records were awesome, don't get me wrong, but the O.A.R. concert? That was the main event. It was this communal, high-energy experience that was legendary for turning casual listeners into die-hard, lifelong fans.
Now, let's be real. Because of their improv style and their whole college town origin, they got lumped into the jam band or frat rock scene a lot. And yeah, as this Reddit user kind of hilariously points out, you could see some similarities to bands like Dave Matthews Band, especially early on. But that's not the whole picture. O.A.R. was absolutely carving out their own unique space.
But here's how the band themselves saw it. They didn't see their live show as just a performance. They talked about it like creating a pulse with the crowd. This incredible shared energy. And that's why no two shows were ever the same. They would switch up the set list in the middle of a show, stretch out songs for 10 minutes, and just improvise. It made every single concert feel like a one-of-a-kind event.
And this really gets to the heart of it, right? The O.A.R. experience is two different things.
On the album, you've got these awesome, tight rock reggae songs with pop hooks and lyrics you can really connect with. But then you go to a concert, and those songs just become launching pads for something so much bigger. You've got extended jams, tons of improvisation, unpredictable set lists, and this crazy energy coming from the audience. This is exactly why fans would trade bootleg recordings of live shows and literally drive hundreds of miles to see them over and over again.
And speaking of organic, even their final lineup came together that way. You know that signature saxophone sound? That wasn't even part of the original plan. They met Jerry DiPizzo at Ohio State. He was actually in a different band, but he started sitting in with them for like one song. Then it became 2 songs, and pretty soon, he was just in the band. It's just another perfect example of how this whole thing was never forced. It just grew authentically.
Okay, so let's talk about what happened beyond Shattered. That moment when the mainstream finally catches up. Because after a full decade of just grinding it out on the road and building this whole parallel universe, yeah, the mainstream finally came knocking. But what's so important to remember is that their biggest hit was not their beginning. For the fans who had been there all along, it was more like a validation, proof of what they'd been screaming about for years.
In 2008, their song Shattered just blew up and introduced O.A.R. to millions of people on mainstream radio. But you gotta make no mistake about it, this was not an overnight success story, not even close. That hit single was built on a foundation of 10 years of non-stop touring, thousands of shows, and a super dedicated fan base that was already packing theaters night after night.
And you know, even their biggest, catchiest pop hit had some real substance to it. Mark Rober has explained that Shattered isn't just some simple breakup song. It's actually about personal accountability. It's about that moment of clarity when a person stops blaming everyone else for their problems and realizes, wait a minute, I'm the one who needs to turn this whole thing around.
So we come to the enduring connection, a revolution built on community. When you step back and look at the whole story, what does it all add up to? Well, it's a model for success that basically throws the standard music industry playbook right out the window. This career wasn't built on hitting the right trend at the right time. It was built on connection, on community, and on just plain old hard work.
So when you really break it down, the lessons from their journey are crystal clear. They built their entire career in this parallel universe, totally outside the mainstream. Think about it. They've maintained that same brotherhood for over 25 years. They succeeded by focusing on building a real community, not just chasing the next hit single. They encouraged a fan-driven culture with message boards and live show trading, turning their fans into their best marketing team. And what did it all prove? That sheer hard work and being authentic can absolutely fill arenas.
And all this really makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, O.A.R. built their revolution with tape decks, college dorms, and the earliest, clunkiest versions of the internet. The tools we have today are just worlds apart. So it leaves us with this big question. In a world that's dominated by TikTok trends and streaming algorithms, could a band today really pull off that same slow, steady, fan-by-fan climb to the top? Is a true grassroots revolution like theirs still even possible? Makes you think.